we could start seeing some very different political news coming out from Washington. Because look, the White House is now ending a practice of letting an outside association controlled by the mainstream media get access and decide who gets access to the president. Also in other news, illegal immigrants in the United States will now need to register with the federal government within the next 30 days. The DHS has created this system by noting they're enforcing the Alien Registration Act of 1940. And meanwhile, while the Department of Government Efficiency and Elon Musk, while they face backlash from government employees and legacy news outlets, Donald Trump seems to believe that DOGE should become more aggressive, not less. And we're now seeing actions to reflect that as well. I'll be talking about these topics and more today, so let's get started. Now, first off, the White House is ending a whole system that used to, just until now, used to let an outside association decide who gets access to the president and who does not. An organization known as the White House Correspondents Association, they used to control a good amount of press access to the White House. And now the Trump administration is replacing them with a new White House press pool and is also promising more access to new outlets, independent journalists, podcasts, radio hosts, and so on. Now look, White House and AP on this. This comes on the heels of the administration removing AP News from the news briefings for allegedly refusing to use the new name for the Gulf of America, right? Now, AP is suing to overturn. They're saying, how can you remove us from the White House? The case is raising debate now over whether the White House has the right to determine which media are allowed in the briefings and which ones are not. And while AP is, again, saying that they should be allowed in, other people are saying, well, what about all the different journalists? What about all the different news outlets that were rejected from having this access, again, by the White House Correspondents Association? Now, look, it seems the new shift could answer that question even further, right? Whether this is legal or not. This is White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt on the announcement of the new press pool. Watch.
As you all know, for decades, a group of DC-based journalists, the White House Correspondents Association, has long dictated which journalists get to ask questions of the President of the United States in these most intimate spaces. Not anymore. I am proud to announce that we are going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, who watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations. Moving forward, the White House press pool will be determined by the White House press team.
She goes on to explain how legacy news outlets are still going to be allowed in, right? They can still have access. They're also going to rotate between some of the preferential seats. They can't just give themselves the seats where they can ask questions and so on. But the White House will also start allowing access to news outlets that had previously been denied access by this association. And this could also help the White House reach new audiences and that, might also highlight different stories and angles using that access. Because look, some are criticizing this. Some are saying it could allow the White House to give preference to news outlets that will be more favorable to Trump's policies, right? He'll put all the people who like him in the front row, and they'll be the ones deciding the news. Others have countered that point, noting it's already been like that. The general political bias of the establishment media tends to lean overwhelmingly in support of Democrat policies while being opposed, very hostile oftentimes, to Republican ones. And so was this an issue when Biden was in office and he kicked out most of the independent journalists? Well, others have also noted that previous administrations on that point have done similar things, actually even further, and denied access to conservative and independent media almost altogether. One example of this was from August 2023. The Biden administration changed the rules on press access to the White House. And what did that do? Well, they created an additional credential that required journalists to get a hard pass. This is one of the press passes you need. And they needed the hard pass to get access to the president and to that whole system. This led to more than 440 reporters losing their press passes. They're making a fuss over AP right now. Biden pushed out 440 reporters. And look, Other outlets could only get day passes, Lex access. They could still go in, but basically had no influence. And the move overwhelmingly gave favor to legacy news outlets and largely discredited independent and new media. Now look, also on the point of the new White House policy, there's been an ongoing debate, especially among conservative news outlets, on whether the press policy should be changed. Now the ongoing argument is that the press pool was run in such a way where establishment news outlets, because they were given power over the White House Press Association, Correspondents Association, legacy news outlets basically had the ability to deny access to their competitors. These were business competitors, and they could say, you're not allowed to do this. And they could then grant themselves preferential treatment because they were the ones deciding who got that, and they gave it to themselves and their friends. And these actions have also, have had influence over the types of stories we see coming out from the White House, because this is how it works. The outlets that get to ask questions to the president, whether it was Biden or now Trump, they're also the outlets that get to influence the quotes and the available information for the day's news. If they want to manufacture controversy, all they have to do is pull out their hit piece questions, ask controversial questions for their topics, and they can write all the hit pieces they want because they have the access. The new quotes from the president responding to their inquiries create fuel for more stories. If they want to manufacture support, well, they just focus on those angles. They basically get to decide the news cycle through having that access. And look, since they largely controlled that, right, the White House Correspondents Association, who gets in, who doesn't, who gets to have that access, who doesn't, it also meant other news outlets without that kind of access, being denied by their own competitors, had to rely on the quotes and clips from the organizations that gave themselves that access. So the question was, look, should the businesses that benefit from this also be able to control it? Well, now we have seen that power structure get shifted. Now we'll have to see what it means in practice. The Trump administration, they only just recently announced this, and so different day for the White House, folks. Now, meanwhile, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to suspend the security clearances of lawyers at Covington and Burling LLP who were tied in with the investigations into Donald Trump through former special counsel Jack Smith. Watch the announcement.
One law firm that provided pro bono legal services to the special counsel's office under Jack Smith's leadership was Covington and Burling. As a result of those actions, we're now going to be suspending and putting under review the security clearances for the attorneys and employees at that firm who worked with Jack Smith's team. And we're going to continue holding the people who were responsible for the weaponization of government and who supported it accountable for what they did.
And you'll be doing this with other firms as time goes by, right?
We're looking at sort of the whole panoply of options.
The weaponization of our system by law firms, even pro bono work they're doing just in order to clog up government, stop government. And nobody knows about it more than me. And hopefully that'll never happen again.
Now look, during the announcement, Trump was questioned on the move by different journalists. Here's how that went when Trump responded. Watch.
So what do you say to people who worry that targeting an individual firm or individuals who aren't Jack Smith?
Excuse me, I've been targeted for 4 years, longer than that.
Thank you, sir.
So you don't tell me about targeting. I was the target of corrupt politicians for 4 years, and then 4 years after that. So don't talk to me about targeting. Yeah, go ahead.
Now look, with this and some other moves we've seen from Trump, I personally get the sense he's fed up. He's done with them. He's really not letting groups or people off the hook who he says were involved in the weaponization of justice. And he sees that in these organizations and individuals that he's removing their access from. He sees it in the news media. He sees it with different government agencies, which he's doing a lot to right now. And he also sees it with key individuals. And it's also likely we're going to see a lot more on this, especially with Kash Patel and Dan Bongino leading the FBI now, because they've been talking about it a lot, especially Dan Bongino on his show. And look, on that front, we're very rapidly seeing developments as well. The FBI, under Kash Patel, is now allegedly investigating what's been referred to as an off-the-books operation that was meant to target and undermine Trump's presidential campaign way back in 2016. Washington Times said this. It said FBI leadership is starting an investigation into the origins of the agency's plan, investigating the FBI through the FBI, investigating the agency's plan a decade ago to infiltrate the campaign of presidential candidate Donald Trump using 2 female undercover honeypot agents, meaning that honeypot, they were trying to seduce people and then compromise them, typically. Now note, the off-the-books investigation, meaning it wasn't really official, launched in 2015 by FBI Director James B. Comey, they say at least, was revealed by an agency whistleblower in a protected disclosure to the White House Judiciary Committee last year and first reported exclusively by the Washington Times in October. Meaning, of course, this was made under oath. The statements, the individual, if they were lying, they could go to jail for it. This has been reported. The FBI under Kash Patel is now investigating it. Now notes, in the intelligence community, a honeypot commonly refers to an undercover operative, usually a woman, who feigns sexual or romantic interest to obtain information from a target. The whistleblower said 2 female FBI undercover employees infiltrated Mr. Trump's 2016 campaign at high levels and were directed to act as honeypots while traveling with Mr. Trump and his campaign staff. Now, it notes as well, the Times has learned that the Bureau, the FBI, now led by Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino, is looking for those once undercover employees under Mr. Comey's direction. They are investigating the investigators. Everything Bongino said was going to happen, well, he's in a position where he personally can make it happen now. Now look, this could also look into the long list of other actions and investigations Donald Trump and his campaign have faced right at that time, which is a decade ago now. There were also cases of surveillance against his campaign. You might remember they called it Spygate. There was also the Trump-Russia dossier that was used to undermine his campaign and his entire first term in office until being proven false only towards the end of his first term, and still managed to impact the midterm elections. But look, back to Trump's press conference with journalists, making announcements on his move to revoke security clearances of key individuals. Donald Trump also offered new hats to some of those journalists present. This is from the official White House feed. Watch.
Look. See that? Trump was right about everything. It just came in. Somebody said, I said, this was sent in by a fan. I said, I think we should make some of them, right? But we were, pretty much. You want one?
I'll pass.
Are you allowed to take one? Because he'll consider it. I know him well. He's sort of a stiff.
I said you were right.
Brian, you're not a stiff. You're sort of a stiff guy. He'll take other things, but not a free hat.
Always say yes to the president. Always say yes to the president.
Would anybody like one?
In other news, illegal immigrants in the United States will now need to register with the federal government within the next 30 days. And as part of this, they will be fingerprinted, and any illegal immigrant who fails to register will now risk facing civil penalties. Now, the decision on this was announced by Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who said this is an act to enforce the Alien Registration Act of 1940. Now look, the United States Citizen and Immigration Services described the new policy in a thread on X. Here's what it said. It said, in support of executive order protecting the American people against invasion, the DHS requires all aliens, any illegal immigrant, to register with USCIS, Immigration Services, right? Failure to comply, it says, will result in criminal and civil penalties, up to and including prosecution and fines. All illegal aliens, it says, all of them 14 years of age or older, with limited exceptions, who are not fingerprinted or registered when applying for a U.S. visa and who remain in the U.S. for 30 days or longer, must apply for registration and fingerprinting. Actually, important note on this. In the actual writing, they're saying aliens, not just illegal aliens. Illegal aliens would be a much more narrow category, still a very broad one. Aliens means any foreign person, effectively. Any person who is here, not even just illegally. This is a big, right? But it notes this as well. Parents and guardians must ensure that their children below the age of 14 are registered. Within 30 days of reaching his or her 14th birthday, the previously registered alien child must apply for re-registration and be fingerprinted. Once an alien has registered and appeared for fingerprinting, unless waived, the DHS, it says, will issue evidence of registration which aliens over the age of 18 must carry and keep in their possession at all times. Meaning they can't just say, I don't have my documents, don't deport me. If you don't have your documents, now this is a much bigger deal. Now, this new requirement, this is part of a January 20th executive order from President Trump on protecting the American people against invasion. And the order on this says this. It says, over the last 4 years, the prior administration invited, administered, and oversaw an unprecedented flood of illegal immigrants into the United States. Millions of illegal aliens crossed our borders or were permitted to fly directly into the United States on commercial flights and allowed to settle in American communities in violation of long-standing federal laws. Many of these aliens unlawfully within the United States present significant threats in national security and public safety, committing, it says, vile and heinous acts against innocent Americans. And notes that others engaged in hostile activities, including espionage, economic espionage, and preparation for terror-related activities. It says many have abused the generosity of the American people, and their presence in the United States has cost taxpayers billions of dollars at the federal, state, and local levels. It adds as well, enforcing our nation's immigration laws is critically important to the national security and public safety of the United States. The American people deserve a federal government that puts their interests first and a government that understands its sacred obligation to prioritize the safety, security, and financial and economic well-being of Americans. This order ensures that the federal government protects the American people by faithfully executing the immigration laws of the United States. That's the official executive order from Trump. Now on that, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, she also explained this further during an interview with Jesse Waters on Fox News. Watch.
The Alien Registration Act says that within 30 days of being in this country illegally, someone must register with the federal government. They will be fingerprinted. They must announce that they are here. And if they do so, they can avoid criminal charges and fines, and we will help them relocate right back to their home country. And what this does is provide them an opportunity to come back someday and to be a part of the American dream. If they don't register, they're breaking the federal law, which has always been in place. We're just going to start enforcing it.
Repeat the name of the website for the illegals to register, because I don't think I got it.
You were testing me. It is USCIS/alien registration, but they need to go there now today, because within 30 days of being in this country illegally, they should register. They will be able to be fingerprinted. We'll know that they're here and we'll help them go home. So it's fantastic, and it's a tool that will help them become an American the right way.
Now look, it seems the new executive order is meant to clear many of the barriers that have been inhibiting the Trump administration from very quickly carrying out mass deportations. This is what it basically does. It makes it so every illegal immigrant, every alien, I don't even know how broad that is, every alien needs to register with DHS, which it seems to be used to deport them. It seems to be the intent of this is to have every one of them be forced to register and be deported. They will deport anyone illegally here. And anyone who doesn't do that, well, it seems that any illegal immigrant who fails to register could then be legally deemed a criminal, which can enhance the process of removing them. Remember, one of the issues they have is they go knock on doors. The guy on the inside can say, you keep on knocking, but you can't come in. If they don't open the door, you can't deport them unless they have a warrant. And this means they can now get warrants because the individual can be deemed a criminal. And of course, they can also face other penalties, which if they want to have a legal method of coming back to the United States, this will make it a lot harder. In other words, this will fast track, it seems, some of the operations. Or at least I think that's what Trump is aiming for. Now, this follows other news that Trump was allegedly not happy with the pace of deportations, as some have pointed out. While illegal crossings and arrests, basically right now, people crossing illegally into the U.S., it's hitting record lows. People are not coming like they used to. There are still some. Arrests are also up. They're arresting a lot of people. But the deportation rate under Trump is not that comparatively high if you look at previous administrations, even Biden. The deportations are not necessarily that high. And some have attributed this to, legal barriers that were put into place by President Joe Biden before he left office. But Trump does seem to be pretty set on changing this. Now, some groups of illegal immigrants, they were also given protected status shortly before Biden left office. The Trump administration, they've since revoked this protection for illegal immigrants from Venezuela. More recently, they also revoked this status for illegal immigrants from Haiti. And so they've been expanding that, removing those protections, allowing them to be deported. And also, Trump recently reassigned the acting director of ICE. Remember, Trump doesn't even have his full cabinet in place yet. They're still being confirmed. So he has acting directors in a lot of positions. He just removed the acting director of ICE. That was Caleb Vitello, and he moved him to a lower level position where he's going to be focused on immigration enforcement within the United States. Now, in addition to this, on the border, January 2025 numbers are out, and according to Customs and Border Patrol, the numbers have dropped 85% compared to January last year. Still a lot of people, but down a lot. Customs and Border Patrol said this, or Customs Border Protection. It says CBP is no longer catching and releasing illegal aliens into the U.S. CBP is leveraging legal authorities to take every reasonable step to ensure illegal aliens are placed in detention and expediently removed from the country. And it added, in simple terms, illegal aliens are being arrested, detained, and then rapidly removed. From January 21st through January 31st, 2025, the number of U.S. Border Patrol apprehensions along the southwest border dropped 85% from the same period in 2024. CBP, with support from the Department of Defense, has dramatically increased active patrols of our international borders. It adds on January 20th, CBP ended use of the CBP One app to schedule appointments for inadmissible aliens. That was the app illegal immigrants could download, and they could schedule to just turn themselves into U.S. authorities and then be basically siphoned to different parts of the country and then get social benefits. That was the app being used as part of the system to facilitate mass migration into the U.S. They cut that out. They also note this. They say CBP, again, Customs Border Protection, also terminated all categorical parole programs and returned to a case-by-case review based on criteria established in law. The Biden administration found a loophole, basically. It was not really done before. They were granting parole to these individuals when they were put on the wait list. When you get parole, you become legally able to access all the different U.S. social benefits, Social Security, welfare, you name it. Now, it notes as well, the number of inadmissible aliens encountered by CBP's Office of Field Operations at ports of entry along the southwest border dropped 93% in the 11 days after January 20th compared to the 11 days prior. Now look, these numbers are a sign that Trump's new border policies, they're working, right? But the big issue on the table seems to be deportations of illegal immigrants who are already in the country, meaning they can't really deport them at the pace that Trump wants. The amount of that, the actual quantity, is not really that much compared to even Biden. But look, on another topic, while the Department of Government Efficiency and Elon Musk have faced backlash from government employees and legacy news outlets, Trump seems to believe that DOGE, instead of maybe pulling back a bit with all this pressure, he says DOGE should become more aggressive, not less. I'll be talking more about this after I come back from a 1-minute break, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. DOGE is about to become a lot more aggressive because look, while the Department of Government Efficiency and Elon Musk, they face backlash from government employees and legacy news outlets and unions and so on, they've been facing a lot of attacks. Donald Trump seems to believe that DOGE should become even more aggressive, not less. He's suggesting that despite all the attacks, all the pressure, all the criticism, they're actually not even going far enough. And in a recent public statement, President Trump urged Elon Musk to take an even stronger stance. This is February 22nd. Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Elon is doing a great job, but I would like to see him get more aggressive. Remember," he says, "we have a country to save, but ultimately to make greater than ever before. MAGA." Now, in response to that, Elon Musk got back, and he said this in his own post on X. Elon Musk wrote simply, quote, "Will do, Mr. President." Now, just one day after that, Elon Musk seemed to act on it. He created a public poll, and he asked, should all federal employees be required to send a short email with some basic bullet points about what they accomplished last week? Well, that poll ended with over 1.2 million votes cast. 70.6% said yes, that Musk should send all federal employees an email asking what they accomplished last week. 5 bullet points, right? Only 29.4% said that Musk should not do this. I wonder if those were government employees. But Elon Musk ended up keeping his word on that, and the DOGE department did in fact do this. They sent emails to all government employees and said failure to respond would be taken as a resignation of their jobs. And through this, as we reported before, Elon Musk said he also hoped to find whether some jobs are ghost jobs. Nobody's there, nobody's working them, and people are just using this fake persona to collect a paycheck. That was one of his accusations. Now look, in the end, what happened? Well, over 1 million federal employees responded to the email by saying what they did last week. And if Elon Musk holds them to his original statement, that failure to reply will be taken as a resignation, well, that can mean around 2 million people just quit their jobs. This is given that the federal government employs, over 3 million people. And that's a lot of people to forcibly have resigned from their jobs, let alone if they review the people who responded and find even more issues. Look, we'll see how seriously this is actually taken. That's a pretty big move if they actually act on it. The White House did say in response, the heads of federal agencies, they'll get to decide how government employees are required or not to respond to that particular DOGE email. One example of this, there were reports that the FBI, its employees, may not need to respond. And so it's not like everybody who didn't respond is going to be fired. There are some exceptions to that. But it also seems right now that government employees could get a second chance. And this second chance may be the one that does determine whether they get fired or not, right? Who keeps their job, who doesn't. Elon Musk wrote in an X post on February 24th, quote, "Subject to the discretion of the president, they will be given another chance." Musk said failure to respond a second time will result in termination. And so it does seem that Elon Musk is giving them a second chance. Again, we'd love to see which agencies are being given an exemption from this. but some people are saying we could see about 1 million government employees maybe not respond. That could mean that maybe some of them are ghost jobs. That could mean some of them are just, they're angry about this. They don't want to respond because they disagree with these actions. But they're going to be doing it again and then determining based on that who keeps their job and who doesn't within the federal government. That said, folks, leave a question, hit the like button. Again, it helps us a lot. Let's jump into some questions. Let's see here. All right, first from Joy Davy, you're saying, what's your opinion on mass firing of federal employees? Isn't that going to make people vote for Democrat because Republicans are doing that? I think it depends on, okay, so let's put it this way. In the news cycle, you do see a lot of people very angry about this. A lot of the mainstream media, they're very, I don't know if you call them mainstream media more, the legacy media, the big corporate media, they're super mad about it. They really don't like it. I would say a lot of government employees are also very angry about it. I personally know some U.S. government employees who are kind of, wondering if they're going to get to keep their job. Even people who like Trump and who voted for him, some of them are wondering if they get to keep their jobs. Other people have pointed out it takes like 5 minutes to respond to the email. It's not like the end of the world. If you want to keep your job, telling your boss what you did once a week, that's not that big of a deal. Like, I don't know what kind of cushy jobs people are getting out there where their boss doesn't even have to ask them what they do once a week. That's kind of normal. In most jobs, if you're doing a job and your boss is like, hey, not even what'd you do the last 5 hours or the last day, but in an entire week, just tell me 5 things you did. That's pretty lenient, to be honest. Again, maybe it's just a different work culture and they're not used to that, but that's not that difficult. They also don't have to write an essay on it. It's like it takes a few minutes to write. And so people who like Trump, people who support Trump, they're probably going to take 5 minutes once a week and just write what they did that week. And they might not even do this on an ongoing basis. It might be a one-time thing. So I personally don't think that email is going to make people who voted for Trump stop voting for Trump, frankly. Not only that, but it might have the opposite effect where, they might see people they don't like get fired and they might like it. I would also add to this, the Biden administration did something very similar, but through other means. And I think this is something kind of forgotten. What did the Biden administration do to change who works for the government, to choose who gets fired, to choose who gets to keep their job, and so on? Well, they created ideological, hyper-partisan branches within the government. They, for example, created DEI initiatives that established within every branch of government an office working on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They had race-based hiring practices. They had, transsexual-based hiring practices. They had other things where if these things go against your political views, if they go against your religious views, you could have been fired. And some people would say that, if you expressed a political view, and remember, Republicans mostly oppose those things, that would rub, these people the wrong way, you lost your job. And so a lot of people were fired or quit because they ideologically disagreed with the actions of the Biden administration. Meaning the Biden administration found a way to not only fire people on the opposite side of the political aisle, but they also found a way to hire people who are more ideologically in line with their policies through the DEI initiatives. They did the exact same thing with environmental initiatives. They did the exact same thing with gender initiatives. And again, they did the same thing with race initiatives. They established those within every single branch of the government. It was an all-of-government action. What else did they do? They also rolled out vaccine mandates. That became more of a partisan issue in the United States. Believe what you want with it, it was very partisan. A lot of conservatives did not believe it was right to be forced to take a vaccine if they didn't want it. Many people who were religious stood against it. They were fired or they quit. That was a big part of what happened to the military. Then what happened? Well, because of the DEI hiring practices, they could then rehire those positions from the pool of people who supported their ideologies. And so, look, if Trump does not get, let's say, 2 million votes from within Washington, D.C., it's not going to impact him in the upcoming election. This will not affect Republicans, at least in my opinion. Let's see, another question here. Seymour Butt, you're saying, oh yes, what do you think about Trump saying that only $5 million illegal immigrants can purchase U.S. citizenship? I'll get into that. He said, I think it is a great idea. There are many illegal immigrants who have become successful here in the U.S., but let them buy their way. So I didn't mention this earlier. Donald Trump created a new pathway to permanent residency in the U.S. Not citizenship technically, but permanent residency, which is pretty close. You can now buy a golden ticket, right? This basically means for $5 million, you can purchase U.S. permanent residence. It's an interesting idea. Now, Trump has also been doing that with foreign investment. If you invest a certain amount of money in the U.S., you can also get different benefits, move here, get different exceptions to trade laws. He's talking about that to, bring in foreign investment. He just made it so that, if you're a foreign business person, if you're a wealthy person, you can pay $5 million and now become a U.S. permanent resident. And Trump is suggesting this will bring in successful people. This will bring in the doctors and the lawyers who they claimed were coming in before and probably were not. This will bring in a higher tier of individuals who are already successful. Meaning, one of the big questions was, well, if you're going to enrich us, why weren't you enriching your own country already? If a person could not be successful in the country they came from, who's to say they're going to be successful here? If they were on welfare in the country they came from, who's to say they're not going to just go on welfare here, right? If they were not productive, not really pulling their weight, it's not going to change sometimes. Now, you could argue some countries have less opportunity. Without a doubt, I know this is an issue in some countries where you have PhDs and they can't even find jobs in their countries. And so they come here and they, work in psychology or whatever else. You do have a lot of that, actually. That's a big argument with a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, actually. India, for example, another example of that. You have people with pretty high-level educations. They don't have as many opportunities in their countries, but there are openings here. So we do get successful people from that tier. Trump is kind of making a fast-track system for that where you can buy your way in. Now, others have criticized Trump on that. They've been saying Trump might not have the legal authority to just magically create that. He's Trump, he's doing it anyway, and they'll have to legally challenge it if they don't want it. But if they legally challenge it, it's going to look bad because Trump's going to be like, well, what do you mean you don't want to have more migrants? I'm helping migrants come in. Who are you to say, the person who says you don't want them or you want all of them, to deny these people? Is it just partisanship or do you want, migrants? So it's going to be an interesting debate on that front. Judy Yakim, you're saying, shouldn't there be requirements that come with access to the White House? We're talking about the White House Correspondents Association. Like requirements to publish full statements instead of sound bites. Some rules not allowing selective coverage of just certain questions. Yeah, the problem we have in the United States is the government can't really dictate what you say. And this is where it gets complicated, right? And this is one of the arguments even against Trump, is that when Donald Trump tells AP News, for example, you have to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America now, which is, why they booted out AP News. AP News can say, well, First Amendment of the Constitution. Not only does the First Amendment protect the free speech of average American citizens, it also protects the freedom of the press and it protects the freedom of belief. So mainly that applies to government, right? Not even local government now, post-Civil War. It means the government cannot do things that would regulate your speech or regulate the freedom of the press. And so it would be a bit of a murky, at least in my personal interpretation, it would be a murky area for the government to say, you have to do this, you have to cover it like this, you have to, not ask certain questions if you want to do it. The counter argument to that is that the Democrats were already kind of doing that. Do you remember when Biden was in office? Remember that it was shown in a lot of pictures. He had prepared questions from all the journalists. The journalists, and remember, he booted out 440 journalists. He kicked them out, and then he made it so that basically the only ones who had this hard pass, and the hard pass doesn't just give access to the front row seats of the White House briefings. It also gives you access to Air Force One. It gives you access to all the press pool travel, meaning when Trump goes and meets with foreign dignitaries, when he travels around the United States going to different sites, the pool of reporters that go with them, that pool used to be determined by the White House Correspondents Association, and that association is partly run by the same media who are part of it. And so they were just rejecting access to their competitors and so on, right? And other organizations were part of that as well. Epic Times, we were able to get some access. They took a lot of actions against us over the years, which, is debatable, I guess. I did not agree with it. But, we had a lot of struggles with them. In fact, it was pretty messy for a long time. They were really trying to push it. There were people trying to push us out constantly. And so it was really hard to get access to it because of this kind of centralized control by these organizations. Now, on that point, you were asking about, could the White House basically do this? Well, remember part of the system that was under the Biden administration. Biden had prepared questions from specific journalists. There were photographs of it. Biden had some gaffes where he just read it out loud and talked about it out loud. But basically, journalists with these big centralized, corporate media, they gave their questions. The questions were cleared, and Biden would only call on those people, right? And so you could say it was kind of a system they had in place where they just would not ask questions unless they agreed with the questions. Trump doesn't do that. When Trump is, doing, again, press briefings, he'll have these hit piece journalists. I don't know if you call them journalists half the time. They don't even cover the press conference a lot of times. They're not even talking about what is announced that day in many cases. They come prepared with preformed narratives, and all they're doing is they go to these press conferences and they ask questions based upon the prepared hit piece they're writing. And that's why you have them asking these questions in line with the narratives they've been forming. They're not actually reporting the news. They're reporting their narrative that has already been formed prior to the news taking place. And so when you hear them yelling out these questions, yelling out criticisms and so on, they're trying to get a response from Trump or whoever's giving the conference, and then they use the questions based on that to create news stories on their hit pieces to keep these stories alive. And so that's kind of how the news, it's a really dirty business. I know this because, I've been a journalist almost 20 years now, and I've seen it firsthand. There's some dirty stuff in the news industry. I remember in New York, I covered trials before. You get these big corporate media, and when they do events, they do like a football huddle, and they get together and they figure out what the news is going to be, what the angle is going to be, and it's like they coordinate that. When I was learning journalism, that was considered unethical. We didn't do that. You don't do that. The name for that is called pack journalism. They call it pack journalism, but they do it. And so what happens is you have these corporate media, these big kind of centralized group, part of their own little club, and they do this football huddle around their narratives, and they just manufacture what the discussion is going to be in the country. And that's why you keep seeing this stuff, right? So they have a monopoly. They have a monopoly on the news cycle because they have a monopoly over access. You see what I mean? Because they're the ones who have access to the quotes, what is said that day, what is reported that day. The insiders, the whistleblowers, and so on, they have the monopoly not just to get that, but also to decide who can get it. They control the news. That's how they do it. And so by upsetting that, by dismantling that, by breaking that system and saying, you don't get to control that anymore, what I think the Trump administration is doing is they're basically disrupting that entire centralized structure and making it so that new people can decide what the news cycle is. Now, it's not to say the news is just going to change tomorrow, but this will change what you hear get reported, because the quotes from the president, from these press conferences and everything else, they will start reflecting that. Now, it won't just change. It won't change everything, though, because remember, there are different briefings and different tiers and so on. There's the State Department briefings, there's the Pentagon briefings, there's the Senate briefings. Those are controlled by different systems. For example, Congress, a lot of the access to that is actually controlled by Congress. And so it's not like the press pool gets to control that. And so there are different ways of doing it. But I think this will have a big effect, at least in terms of coverage of the president himself. Anyways, folks, inside politics within the news industry, right? Let's see, another question here. Potter's Ground, you're saying, build your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across. Sun Tzu. Yeah, Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese general and writer of the book Art of War. He always suggested you should never fully surround your enemy. Always give them a way out. But make sure the way out you give them is the direction you want them to go into. You do see politicians using this quote. You see it in business. You see it in business a lot, right? Right? Trump is good at this. You're right. The guy who wrote Art of the Deal. What does Trump do? Let's say there's 10 pieces on a table, right? There's 10 coins on a table. Trump will say, all right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take all of these and your jacket and your coffee mug. I'm taking everything and more. And this will be great. I'm gonna turn this into my new Riviera. I'm gonna make this into my new fortune. I'm gonna build great things with this. And so not only, let's put it this way, the nature of haggling, when you haggle with somebody, is you need to kind of, you bid high because you want to negotiate to a price that's better than what the price was in the first place. And so normally in negotiations, let's say it's here to here, rather than negotiate in the middle, you negotiate here, so that when they negotiate back, you don't go to the middle, you might get something out of it. When Trump negotiates, he goes to here, hey, maybe you should become the 51st state of America. Maybe we should just take you over. Maybe we should destroy your entire economy because, we don't really need you. That's how he debates, right? So when he's negotiating, he jumps to here. That's what he does. He doesn't even jump to here. He jumps to here. And again, as Potter's Ground is saying, you give him a golden bridge. What is the golden bridge? Well, he negotiates back, and maybe the negotiation ends like here rather than what would have been like the middle or something further than that. That's how he negotiates. And you do see this happening right now. I've actually talked to some interesting people. I actually met a guy one time who, back before Trump was president. He works in real estate in New York. He actually rejected a construction deal with Trump because he said this is what the guy told me how the deal went with Trump, right? This is the guy I know works in real estate. He gets invited in. Trump wants him to build a building. He walks into Trump's office, gold gilded everything. Trump's kind of sitting in his chair looking out the window. This is before he was president. Looking out the window, turns around, negotiates with him. And the guy basically said this. The way that Trump wanted to negotiate the deal was there was almost no profit margin for him. And for the benefit of taking the deal would not have been profit. Trump basically said, you'll get something great looking on your resume, a Trump Tower, a Trump hotel. And so, not only you won't lose money, You won't make money, but you'll have a very big, beautiful building on your resume. And you can use that to get future jobs. And that was how Trump negotiated. In other words, there's no profit. The other guy doesn't basically make out with anything. And so the margin is very thin. That's how Trump likes to negotiate. Very thin margin of benefit for the person he's negotiating with. And I think you see this actually with the way he's negotiating trade deals right now. He's talking reciprocal tariffs. He's talking about conquering entire countries or having them become part of us. He's doing things in such a way that will give them very little room to move. And that is how he has always negotiated. And so, you do see this. It's also why some people get, unnerved by how he does it, but because it's so different from the way most people do it. But that is how he does business, it seems. Another question here. Trump triumph. You're saying, Josh, can the DOGE concept be applied at state levels? California, Oregon, Washington, for starters. There have been talks about it. The problem is you would have to have the state start it. So on that point, you do actually have some states starting operations like that. DOGE departments, maybe not of the same name, but they are conducting similar operations because, they're seeing that at the federal level, a lot of Republicans like it. I don't know where Democrats stand. I've heard estimates 70 to 80% of Americans approve of what's happening on that front. Because look, go back to 2008. Go back to Bill Clinton. Obama and Bill Clinton, both Democrats, they were talking about very similar things: cutting government spending, cutting the fat, reducing things, getting rid of unnecessary spending, transparency. Those used to be Democrat narratives. You could argue that Trump is going a lot further with it than anybody else has. But for the most part, the idea of, cutting government spending and reducing unnecessary spending and programs, Democrats used to agree with that. And so I don't think a moderate approach would be controversial even with most Democrats. And so, you do have this happening at the state level to an extent. The issue, though, is that the federal government only has so much authority over state government. This is part of the separation of powers in the United States. And so some states would just probably not want to do it. I couldn't see California want to do it. The other side of it is that Trump could kind of force them to do it by repealing government funding from the federal level. You have some states that almost, to a massive degree, rely on federal government funds to sustain state-level policies. And if Trump were to say, we're not going to pay for this anymore, unless you get rid of this program, this program, this program, unless you audit things and make sure it's not being wasted, the federal government is not going to give you money. If you do that, states like Wisconsin, states like California, a lot of states, many of the blue states, New York and so on, they're not going to be able to make it. And if you're not able to make it, what do you have to do? Well, you have to find things to cut. The problem is a lot of them don't want to cut. They're not going to want to fire people. They're not going to want to get rid of programs. And so Trump can put some additional pressure, maybe federal investigations into corruption or waste or whatever else. For example, like what he's doing with the California high-speed rail project. He's investigating where that money went. Then you can start seeing them be forced to make changes. And so there are some actions on that front. So, we'll see. Another question here. Bellator Prodeo, you're saying, do you think these hardline immigration policies will have a ripple effect in changing the mindset of assisting our European friends? I think it's already happening. Europe is very complicated, in case you did not know, right? Europe is very complicated. So in Europe right now, these countries, they don't have the same protections on individual rights that we do in the United States. You know, in the UK, right, I think they have common law, right? They have basically a system of law based on legal precedent, and things can kind of be determined on the spot. You can have a judge effectively rule something kind of on a whim, right? There's some basis to it, but there's a lot of leeway for them to kind of decide themselves how to judge it. You do not have protections on free speech in many of those countries. You do not have protections on the freedom of belief, not fully at least, in many of those countries. And while the United States has been the model for, you know, the republics of the world, the democracy, right? Most countries are not democracies, they are republics, which means they have elected leaders who represent the people in government. A republic is what you call a representative democracy. So if your country has a parliament, if your country has a Congress, you are a republic, not a democracy. A democracy would be that every citizen has to go and vote on every single policy and every single bill. Representative democracy, i.e. a republic, is where you elect officials to represent you in the democratic process. Most countries are republics, right? But the way it works basically is that many of these countries have adopted that side of the American model and do recognize to an extent some American values. To an extent, they allow for freedom of belief. Most countries in Europe, they're not going to persecute you if if you're in England and you decide to be a Protestant rather than an Anglican. They're not going to put you through, like, the stretching machine. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry about that these days. If you're in Spain and you believe in something other than Catholicism, the Spanish Inquisition is not going to come burn your feet off. You know what I mean? They have some protections on freedom of belief these days. Things are not like they used to be. But in terms of actual law, it's a little more murky. And so what you do have in these countries is people are not allowed to criticize a lot of government policies. They're not allowed to criticize mass illegal immigration because it's deemed a human right. They're not allowed to come out and even support certain political parties without being labeled and maybe even attacked by the system. I was at CPAC recently. I was talking to some Jewish people from Israel, and they're part of a more nationalist party. They were saying that, Trump talking about turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, because of Israeli law, if an Israeli were to say that, they would go to prison for suggesting what Trump is saying he wants to do. An Israeli could be thrown in prison in Israel because of their laws. And, it's the same thing in the UK right now. You have people, praying in their heads, not even out loud in front of abortion clinics, and they're facing criminal charges for it. The same thing in Germany, the same thing in a lot of countries. And so, it's a complicated issue in these countries because you do have a lot of problems with mass migration because they're getting immigrants from countries that have a lot of terrorist problems. They're getting issues of, people driving their cars through crowds of people and killing people. They're getting mass stabbings, really horrific things, killing like little girls and stuff. I mean, horrifyingly sad things. And so you do have political parties that kind of is the basis of their politics, make the immigration issue a main focus. Now, the ironic thing about some of those political parties is by American standards, other than maybe the immigration issue, they're still kind of far left. Like, some of those political parties by American standards are borderline socialist. The only difference being that they're opposed to mass migration, and so it's not as black and white. The political situation not as black and white as it may seem if you compare it to the United States. But Europe, at the very least, is now having these discussions, and America being recognized as the global model for government, at least among the free world countries, is having an influence on the political leanings and views of the people in those countries. And so you do see a shift taking place. Let's see, another question here. Merlin Ambrosius, you're saying, I voted for Trump. I'm a federal employee. I responded to the email, took 1 minute. I would vote for Trump again. Case in point, right? Yeah. In fact, even the White House press secretary, she said that she had to fill out the email. She said it also took just a few minutes. And so, again, my personal interpretation of that email, if you hate Trump, you would probably be really offended by that email, and so it would really irk some people. Look, put yourself on the other side of the aisle. If you were a very strong Trump supporter, and Biden was in office, or Kamala Harris, if Kamala Harris had won the election, and she said that we're going to look to fire a ton of people who do not support the policies of the Kamala Harris administration. She comes into office, signs, 300 executive orders, and if you as a federal government employee do not support those orders, you can be fired. It's Kamala Harris, right? And then they send out an email because they want to find out who they're going to fire, and Kamala Harris's administration, maybe she has like Bill Gates instead of Elon Musk, another billionaire. It's Bill Gates running the DOGE department, right? Maybe it's the Gates department or something. They renamed it something else. And you get this email from this billionaire that you also don't like if you're, your political leanings. And it says, what did you do this week? So we can see whether we fire you or not. How would you feel? I guarantee a lot of conservatives would also be unhappy. And so, in terms of political leanings, it is kind of partisan, and I can personally understand why people, even if they believe that they work very hard, might be irritated by it. You know what I mean? At least in terms of how I see it. Let's see, James George, you're saying, Apple's CEO Tim Cook announced a fresh $600 billion USD investment into the USA a few days back. He's saying Trump's policy is already reaping rewards, that $600 billion USD would otherwise have gone to the UK or China. Yeah, so, this is a big blow to the CCP as well. Apple used to manufacture most of its goods in China. That was Foxconn, right? The Foxconn facilities where they have nets outside the windows so that if the overworked employees decide they can't take it anymore and fling themselves in the windows, you can't even escape by suicide. That was the Foxconn facility, right? Now, they moved some of that to Taiwan, but a lot of it was still, mainland Chinese jobs, right? Now, a lot of manufacturing has been pulled out of China. One of the issues is companies like Apple and so on. If you work in China, you have to give the CCP access to your machines. You have to give them your source code. You have to allow data access. You have to allow a lot of things they might not agree with. And also because of the economic shutdowns, for example, under the COVID lockdowns, which the CCP had a lot of lockdowns, that messed up global shipping. It messed up a lot of things. And so it became a little, and also they need rare earth minerals and everything else. And so manufacturing in China became very dangerous, very risky, and not really financially feasible. And so the US now trying to attract manufacturing or other business, that has the effect of pulling out what would have been investment for China or another country and bringing it to the United States. And so it is very interesting from that standpoint. The other side is American big tech. They've been facing a lot of fines from European countries. The UK, France, you even have Latin American countries fining American companies. Take, for example, Meta, take Apple, take Elon Musk and X. And it's very hard for them to operate because they get fined like $100 million a year from some random little country, to the extent that that random little country can almost subsidize its government by soliciting money from American companies like that. And so that's coming to an end as well, it seems. Now we'll see what happens with Apple. A lot of these companies, in my opinion, have gone a little too, very too far when it comes to currying favor with the Chinese Communist Party. And a lot of them, frankly, I think have done things that have crossed the line of maybe even human rights abuses. But I do think that maybe there'll be some investigations into that, maybe some other things, and we'll get some answers on it. But they do seem to be interested in the new changes taking place if Trump can again bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and remove the ability of other countries to force these companies to do things that go against American values, which many of them would argue has been what's happening, that a lot of the things they had to do were not their choices. It was because of foreign pressure, and the American government until now had not been defending them against that foreign pressure. Coercion, right? So again, folks, we'll see. That said, happy Monday. Join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Sorry, tomorrow's... Okay, give me a break. I've been traveling 2 weeks. Happy Thursday. Join me tomorrow, Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. It's been a long 2 weeks, folks. Join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you so much for being here. Give us a like, leave a comment, folks. I'll see you then. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.